Hello, everybody. Welcome in here live to the Marlow's Tavern in Peachtree Corners for a special edition of our Marlow's matchup, as well as our Road to Atlanta presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union, as we're here to get ready for the SEC Championship game tonight. And also we'll do a little looking ahead to recruiting with the start of the early signing period on the horizon. It is a jam-packed edition of our show as I welcome in the former Georgia All-American John Stinchcomb. You see him there. Obviously, Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. So a lot for us to cover over the course of the evening with a huge crowd gathered here in the patio of the Marlow's in Peachtree Corners. A lot of fun with them coming after our broadcast is done as we kind of do Q&A stuff and just kind of talk in a generally casual fashion about how it's going to go down for Georgia on Saturday and how it might go down beyond that. Of course, we'll look forward to doing that with those of you who couldn't be here with us tonight in person in the room in the Marlow's and Peachtree Corners. We'll give you a chance to do that on our comment section, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, everything else. Thanks for watching here live on video. And John, I'll start with you if you don't mind. I've had a chance to kind of walk around and talk to a lot of the people who are here. And one of the things that's a pretty common theme is the thought that I think that Georgia can win the game, maybe, but there's obviously a lot of respect being given to LSU right now. They're the point spread favorite. You've seen them explode offensively throughout the course of the year. The one message I've tried to resonate on Dog Nation Daily this week, the one thing I'll say in this room here tonight, is anyone who tries to tell you that this can't be a Georgia win, I think they're overstating the situation. I won't insult anyone's intelligence by saying, Georgia's got this in the bag, it's going to be easy. At the same time, I'm not going to allow my own intelligence to be insulted to say that UGA doesn't have a chance.
Georgia very much belongs in this game. I think there's two things I look at and say, here's where my reason for optimism is. Number one, this defense is arguably the best to ever wear the red and black. I mean, they are crazy good. I said legit good earlier to Jeff, right? Legit good.
Legit.
They're legit good. So the fact that they have yet to allow 3 touchdowns in a game, I mean, I think that speaks to their dominance. That's number one. And number two is Jake Fromm has yet to disappoint in those big game moments. I mean, I think you look back at SEC championships in the past and the national championship, it's not because of the play of Jake Fromm. I have confidence in him. It hasn't been his best year, but when the lights are shining bright, he tends to step up.
And, Jeff, I'll bring you into this conversation as well because your recruiting expertise, one of the stories you wrote this week at DogNation.com is when you look at what we think of as the blue chip ratio, the number of former 4- and 5-star players. You know, guys have been writing about this over the course of a long period of time. Georgia, obviously, for the most part, out-recruits everybody, with maybe the exception of a couple teams in this country. Over the course of the last 4 years, Georgia's out-recruited LSU. Now, it's not an overwhelming talent advantage for UGA in this game, but when I think about the chronicled lists of reasons why Georgia could pull the upset as about a 7.5-point underdog, it is the presence of a lot of those elite recruits that I think make me feel like Georgia has a chance, and I'll give you 2 areas in which I think this shows up. If Georgia runs into an issue along its offensive line, injury, whatever else, key backups are 5 stars. Cade Mays may be a starter or he may be a reserve, but he's a former 5-star. Jamari Sawyer, a guy that's played, that's a former 5-star. Ben Cleveland in kind of a rotational spot as a sometime starter. Very high 4-star from the class of 2016. On defense, a lot of the starters are not necessarily the former 5-star guys, but a lot of these key reserves, third down packages, things like that, these are the elite recruits that you've been covering for a number of years. So I thought the story that you wrote this week, for me, crystallized in pretty perfect form of why you count out Georgia at your own peril in a game like this.
Well, for a lot of folks that feel that these games, or at least the foundation for these games, are laid on signing days in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So we went back and we looked at what we would call a blue chip ratio. And someone on one of our shows this week is like, what exactly is a blue chip? And I'm glad I got the question because we sometimes assume that folks know that, but it's a 4 or 5-star prospect. Yeah. And there are really only about 380 of those every year across the country. They hand out 380, 394 or 5-star ratings. When you think about 120 teams in the BCS, that means you're by and large, you only get about 4 or 5 per team every cycle, except when you're in the SEC. Georgia, going back to 2016, had signed 75 of those blue chips. LSU had signed 49. Excuse me, 59. I want to get that right. So then we went a little bit deeper because some smart guys out there would be like, all right, Jeff, that's great, but does that count a Justin Fields, a Luke Ford? Does that count the guys that are no longer in the program? For instance, some of those 5 stars Georgia signed, Isaac Nauta, Mecole Hardman, Jacob Eason, those guys are all in the NFL or long gone. So we call it like a revised or an attrition blue chip ratio. And Georgia still has 59 of those guys, and LSU has 47 of those guys. So I always keep looking at one thing. Does Georgia have better players or more good players, more talented players? Yeah, I think so. But does Georgia have a guy like Jamar Chase? Does Georgia have a guy like Terrace Marshall? Does Georgia have a Joe Burrow? That's the thing to think about. But the flip side of this game, which makes it so interesting to me, is I don't think LSU has a J.R. Reed or a Tyler Clark or a Richard LeCount. I don't think they have those pieces on the other sideline either.
Well, I'll bring John's comment back into this a moment ago where he said this may be the best Georgia defense of all time, certainly in the modern era. If that's true, John, I think one of the things we have a tendency to do sometimes is overrate the impact that star players make on a game like this and maybe underrate the impact that, I don't want to call them role players necessarily, but the casual fan, the names for either team that the casual fan may not know. If Georgia's defense really is the best that it's ever been, if it's the best of the Kirby Smart era, if it's the best of the modern Georgia era, the reason why I believe that's true is because of the number of guys that Kirby can play. They play nearly 30 guys on a regular basis, and almost all of those guys have the kind of NFL-type body. Now, they won't all play in the NFL, but you can't look at them and say, obviously, well, that guy's definitely not an NFL player. On spec, a lot of these guys look like NFL players, and that gets back to the recruiting part of this. Now, obviously, I'm a recruiting follower. I love reading about it. I love studying about it. But in a game like this, the 4-year edge that Georgia has had, I'm not telling you it's a drastic difference. I'm not telling you it's the reason why you ought to bet the mortgage that Georgia wins the game, but it gives Georgia a chance.
I love that. I love to hear that you have so many blue chip players on our sideline. That's a good thing. I mean, we're foundationally further ahead than we've ever been in Athens. But at the end of the day, you got to perform. I think 2 years ago when Roquan Smith left, the big question is how are you going to replace him, right? Yeah. You're looking for one guy, and Georgia has not done that, and nor have they need to. What makes Georgia's defense special is that you're able to roll through so many different guys across the board, defensive line, outside linebacker, the secondary even. So many guys contribute, and there's not that drop-off. And I think that speaks to what Jeff's saying about having so many, the depth and the 4- and 5-star guys. Now, with that said, I would take a great team over a roster full of stars any day. Sure. I lived through it while I was in Athens. That sophomore year, and we've talked about it up here before, my sophomore season, you had an all-star defense, and we finished 6-6. So it's not about individual talent. It's about putting great teams together. Now, if you have great talent and you put together a great team, that's when you have something special, and I think Georgia's got that potential.
Okay, I have a pretty clear vision in my mind of what I think that Georgia needs to do to try to win this game on Saturday. I want to hear from both of you guys on that, and you can share your own thoughts. It's kind of a combined edition of the Marlow's matchup and Road to Atlanta, presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. Obviously, we're here at the Marlow's in Peachtree Corners. Great crowd. We're going to have a great time here tonight. And by the way, a lot of you hear us talk about Marlow's all the time, and you kind of wonder, hey, maybe I need to be a part of that myself. First of all, the next time we're at a Marlow's event, no matter which tavern it is, hopefully it's in a neighborhood close to you, you'll come on by and see us. But it's also a great gift to give this holiday season. And Marlow's been doing this for a while. I love celebrating this way. This is a bottle of Michelle Brut sparkling wine. And this bottle, or not this bottle, but a bottle that looks very similar to this bottle, can be yours as a complimentary gift from Marlow's when you purchase a $50 gift card. But that's not all. If you buy a $100 Marlow's gift card, which gives you access to the chef-inspired food and is a really classy gift to give that hard-to-buy-for person on your gift list here this holiday season, in addition to the Michelle Brut sparkling wine, which you do get, Marlow's is also going to offer you up a $20 complimentary gift card as well. So it's a great chance to celebrate Marlow's Tavern here at the holiday season and give this as a gift. Folks love chef-inspired food. They love craft cocktails, and you will love Michelle Brut sparkling wine as a special thank you. I'm telling you right now, this worked for us in 2017. I believe it may work again on Saturday. Popping the cork on this thing, the sparkling wine, watching that thing be celebrated as it should in grand style after an SEC championship win on Saturday. I don't mind if I do.
Are we going to have that in the camera bag for Mercedes-Benz?
That's
after
a good,
after that one?
I don't know that that's going to pass the muster with the security there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but it could very well be. This is one of those things we enjoy outside the stadium after the game is over with, but we're going to certainly have a good time with that. And everybody else here tonight, great food, great cocktails, great fun. Everybody having a good time here at the Marlow's Tavern in Peachtree Corners. All right, here is my belief, Jeff and John, for you to weigh in on how Georgia wins this game on Saturday, and we'll take some comments on this too. I don't think a path to victory for Georgia is trying to be a sugar-free version of LSU. Hey, LSU throws the ball over the yard. We better do the same thing. I don't think that's it. To me, and I don't know another way to say this, I think Georgia's got to be Georgia on steroids. I mean, it's just got to go out there and maul people in offensive line, Swift healthy or not, you got to go out there, find a way to run the football, and really be the more physical team, because that's the one thing I think that Georgia can be. I think that Georgia can be the more physical team in this game. It can execute the offensive game plan that it's had all season. It can just execute it better. Jeff, is that a winning recipe for Georgia if it can do it that way?
Well, I think maybe the ultimate brilliance of whatever LSU has put together, if they could run counter and defy a fundamental belief in my mind for the way football games are won, the way the SEC championship is won. I think that's in the trenches. I think that's from the inside out. And if LSU is good enough to overcome what I see as Georgia having an edge in the offensive and defensive lines on both sides of the ball, that would be mighty impressive for me because, you know, to even dial it down even simpler, here's what I see. I see Georgia around 28 to 30 pass attempts, and I see them with 45 to 50 carries on the ground. I think that's the formula to get it done.
So, John, how about you? Do you think that a defensive-minded, running game-minded, offensive line-led, that's what we kind of thought Georgia was in the summer. Here we are in December still playing. Is that the way that Georgia should approach this on Saturday?
I think we know who they are. That's their identity. We're not going to turn the ball over. We're going to control it. We're not going to give you any free mistakes, but we're going to methodically beat you up. And that's when Georgia's been at their best, is when they're able to utilize that size up front and their stable of backfield. I think it's going to be really key for them not to get down early. I don't think you can let LSU jump out to an early lead and play catch-up. That's not the way Georgia's built. So I think it's about controlling the ball and on the other side of the ball, eliminating as much as possible Edwards-Helaire. I mean, he is a real difference maker and a guy that you have to circle. He's not one of those, I'm sure he wasn't a five-star guy coming out because he's so small.
3-star.
But you talk about a ball player, that guy can play some football.
So, Jeff, I'll bring you to a conversation that John and I have had before. In fact, John shared this on some of our Marlow's events in the past, that the adage in football that you are what you put on film. John's talked about this before, that the dream scenario of, there's this sort of special reserve collection of plays that, much like, your grandfather's brandy, you've been saving for that special moment, that somehow there's not going to be this secret playbook that gets unlocked against LSU. If Georgia had them in close games versus Auburn or Florida or somebody like that, they probably would have already used them. But this is really about finding a way to be what you have been, maybe just a little bit better.
Yeah, that seems like the popular theory from a lot of folks, that Georgia's going to break out these circle routes, these wheel routes, these Texas routes, these unders, these digs, these slants. And it's kind of like Kirby Smart was saving it in case of an emergency to just bust it open. That's just not the way football is made. Football games are won, especially this high level. Here's the thing for me, when everybody starts eyeballing this game, is I wonder which unit here is truly special. Is it Georgia's defense, which I don't know if I've seen the rushing touchdown streak. Folks, Georgia's given up 0 touchdowns defensively in the third quarter all year long. 6 total points.
That's worth an applause.
2 field goals. 1 field goal against Murray State, 1 field goal against Texas A&M, and then Murray State got a pick 6 that doesn't count against the defense. So that's 13 total points in the third quarter, coming out of the game, coming out of halftime, when everybody's made their adjustments and everybody's got their plan. I just got a big thing I want to see. Is LSU and Burrow and Marshall and Chase and Hilaire any more dangerous than Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma in 17, or Tua and those what looked like Gary Danielson said, Alabama's got 4 Antonio Browns at receiver without the drama. I don't know if that this collection of great players for LSU is any bigger of a mountain for Georgia to climb than those two previous teams. Yeah. Georgia's got a better defense in its backpack as well.
Let me bring in the YouTube comments on this. Michael Porter, Elite GB, Devin Glenn, Savage, kind of talking about the need for Georgia to get a lead early, establish something quick. John touched on that a moment ago. But, Jeff, I'm going to push back on that narrative just a little bit. Now, I'm not telling you I don't want Georgia to get off to an early lead. Obviously, every Georgia fan does. But when you think about some of the best performances in the Kirby Smart era, they weren't necessarily fast starts. I'm thinking about Florida in 2018. I'm thinking about a Rose Bowl game in 2017 where Georgia had to come back. People may forget the 2017 SEC championship was a close game early, eventually won 28-7. We have seen fourth quarters, and in some cases overtimes, but fourth quarters be where Georgia has really shown up here. So for the Georgia fan who's looking for that path to victory, and especially that Georgia fan who may be wondering if there is a path to victory in a game like this, don't assume the game's over if Georgia's down early. Now, obviously, there's a certain deficit that you can't come back from, but LSU's an explosive offense. They're going to score at some point in time. I'm not even quite sure an early deficit would get me to fold the tent, pack up, go home, and say Georgia doesn't have a chance to win it, because I've seen Kirby's teams oftentimes in big games at their best in fourth quarters. The Alabama games come to mind as the opposite of that. But the Alabama memories are so prominent, I think it makes people forget just how frequently in other big games Georgia's actually played its best quarter in the fourth quarter.
Well, I mean, here's the ludicrous part. If Georgia fans, let's take a quick poll in the room. If Georgia's up 10 heading into the fourth quarter against LSU, how many have those bad juju memories in the back of their head a little bit about the last two big games? Now, naturally, you'd want to be ahead going in, but, I want to share a quick story, and this is from out of the mouths of children. There's sometimes ultimate truth. My son Kyle was telling me about his handball game in PE this week.
Is that right?
And he was telling me how great his team was, and he said, "Dad, we are just like the Georgia Bulldogs." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean, son?" And he says, "Well, we can stop anybody. We've got the best defense ever. But sometimes it's hard for us to score."
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and first of all, I'm at the games. He's not watching the game with his dad and a critical ear or a critical eye. He's watching that with his mama and friends and neighbors. So for him to pick up on that, and all the sixth graders at Woodstock Elementary to pick on that they're just like Georgia. Great tenacious D, but have sometimes scoring a lot of points.
We'll get some Facebook comments here coming up in a moment. We'll hear more from John Stinchcomb as well. Let me also remind you on this very special edition of our Marlow's matchup here at the Marlow's and Peachtree Corners. We're also continuing our Road to Atlanta coverage. It's been brought to you by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union all week long. By the way, speaking of Georgia United Credit Union, you can get a Georgia Bulldogs debit card when you go to the website gucu.org/GUCU.org/GoDogs. GUCU.org/GoDogs. Three design options to choose from when you open a fun checking account there that includes options to earn interest. Georgia United Credit Union, so much more than a bank. They provide great access to your money, online banking, enhanced security features, and so much more. Check them out online at gucu.org/GoDogs. Learn more about Georgia United Credit Union and find out about all the great options they have for a Georgia Bulldogs debit card. All right, let's get ready to take advantage of some of these Facebook comments, kind of roll through these and see kind of what's going on. Bryce Dixon says LSU's already put a hype video out there. They're definitely getting excited about the game. Whitney Spires says talking about James Cook, that name comes up. John, we had Brad Nessler on Dog Nation Daily today. He's obviously going to call the game for CBS. Listening to Nessler speak, you certainly get the sense from him that he's approaching his job on Saturday as if DeAndre Swift's not going to be fully healthy. So if that's I don't want to put words in Nessler's mouth, that was the sense I got from him on this. None of us truly know about this situation until Saturday at kickoff. But if we assume that Swift is not 100% healthy, how much does that change the equation for Georgia, for you in this game?
I think it changes the way you have to attack LSU. James Cook is a dynamic playmaker, but he's a guy you got to create space for. DeAndre Swift creates his own space and has no problem running between the tackles. I understand that Zeus would be your next between the tackles back, but candidly, he's not DeAndre Swift. Few people are. I think that's a big factor. I think the way Georgia operates their offense changes pretty drastically if DeAndre Swift isn't healthy or isn't able to utilize the way that you normally would.
What about you, Jeff?
So the thing I think about there is I bumped the table there a little bit. The thing I think about there is somebody from Georgia's got to be the bell cow. And immediately to me, a lot of people throw a lot of expectation on Zamir White. Hey, a lot of the recruiting folks have done a lot of that. But I think Zamir White this year just needs to be Zamir White. Maybe next year he can be Zeus for the Georgia program. If Swift is not a go, then it's a varying degree for me. I want to know 90% means 10 touches, 12 touches.
That's right.
70, 80%. At that point, you might be better served instead of bringing up a White, bringing up a Cook. You might want to just ride the horse named Brian Herring as long as you can. Because that's a guy, if you've got one calling card or one signature for Brian Herring, and I hear the voice, that syrupy Minnesota voice of Munson in my head when I think of this, is that sheer grit and determination, the way Brian Herring runs the ball, the way Brian Herring can catch the ball. Remember that Florida highlight video there as well. I think some Georgia back has got to get 20 touches. You can tell me DeAndre Swift gets 20 touches on Saturday. I like those chances for Georgia.
Yeah.
But if it's 8 or 10, and that's just the best he can do, then Brian Herring needs to touch the ball about 20 times up the middle.
John, I should say, Jeff, one of the things I've said a lot this week is I totally agree with all of you that DeAndre Swift being less than 80% in this game, I don't know why 80 is my magic number, but somehow 80 seems about at least effective enough. Anything less than that, he's probably just a decoy at the time that he plays. But if it's a portion of DeAndre Swift mixed in with some Zamir White and James Cook, Jeff, I don't think it's too much of an ask for Cook and White, especially given the fact that along with Kendall Milton, they're your potential leaders of the rushing attack for next season. Here in this 13th game of 2019, I don't think it's too much to ask for them to help shoulder, no pun intended, some of the load on Saturday. They're not DeAndre Swift. I'm not going to pretend that they are. But nobody else is going to shed a tear for Georgia if it's backup options in lieu of a less than fully healthy Swift is the nation's former number one running back in Zamir White and James Cook, who is plenty an elite recruit himself, a guy attached with a famous last name. Back in the summer, we thought Georgia had running back depth, and even though we haven't seen that come to fruition as much in the regular season, I'm not quite so sure that it's time to say that Georgia doesn't still have some running back depth. Maybe it just hasn't been displayed yet.
I think folks get lost in this, but the type of game Georgia needs to play, I've heard you say it's a chop game this weekend. Folks, 15 carries for 65 yards from Zamir White. Who would take that right now? That's 4.5 yards a carry. That's moving the ball. And then if you can get 20 for 80 out of Brian Herring, then all of a sudden you've got 35 carries and about 140 yards. And that's already the base bones, the base layers of a really strong rushing attack against LSU.
Yeah, I think that's true, too. John, let me bring you in on this. A lot of folks in the comment section talking about some of the secondary issues, the challenge of going up against these LSU wide receivers. I'm going to see if I can find a couple of these to read. Clint Haynes says our number one defense will beat LSU's number one offense. Defense will bring us the national championship this year. If you wanted me to center in on a couple of position groups that would give me the most confidence, one of those is probably the offensive line because, I do think that's the group that we kind of made our bet on before the season started. But beyond that, I'm going to say defensive secondary here. Hopefully it's a healthier Tyson Campbell than we've seen for most of this season. It's a more mature DJ Daniel. It's Tyreek Stevenson, who seems to be coming along at the right time, providing depth. Obviously, Eric Stokes is what Eric Stokes is, a surefire contributor. The two safeties have been rock solid all year long. If you told me the position group that I like best for Georgia, the position group that I would be most willing to bet on Saturday, for me it's the defensive backs.
And I think the two unheralded, probably not getting the regard they need, is LeCount and Reed. Those guys are difference makers in the back end. Their consistency, the fact that you don't talk about them a lot, really highlights the fact that they're doing their job. I think they eliminate some of those big plays that other teams have tried to attack Georgia with, and that will restrict and limit what LSU can do. They're good against the run, they're great against deep balls, and they play in position. And that comes on the backs of, hopefully, what could be the healthiest lineup of defensive or cornerbacks that we've seen in quite some time. Stokes, Campbell, Stevenson. I think if you kind of limit your exposure to, candidly, Devod Wilson, who at times has been the weak link of that group, that's a solid secondary, really solid.
Jeff, let me bring you on this too, because Tobias Swackert in our Facebook comment section talking about the need to limit those big passing plays for LSU. Obviously, they've made that the hallmark of their attack all season long. So I'm going to let you be Dan Lanning for a moment. Just give me kind of like pieces of the pie here. What portion of that pie for you is somewhat conservative, putting as many defenders in passing lanes as possible, trying to keep the ball in front of you? What percentage of that is, hey, I got to get after Joe Burrow, get in his face? What percentage of that is playing a form of contain so he doesn't have anywhere to run? What are your kind of, just broadly speaking, pie chart look of how aggressive you want Georgia to be defensively versus how much it needs to make sure, as Tobias mentions, it finds a way to limit those big plays and maybe not gamble too much? Yeah,
so J.R. Reed, I think, laid it out very good this week as he said, everybody, you remember that campaign, just say no? Just say no to yak. And yak, what that means is yards after the completion. That's Georgia just needs to tackle the ball when it's thrown in the air, and that's the game. I got a huge stat to throw out. This was from the folks at Pro Football Focus. Eric Stokes has given up 0 touchdown passes this year. Now, Jamar Chase has scored 17 touchdowns this year. So you got Stokes on Jamar Chase. That's got to be a great neutralizer effect right there. The second thing is I want to know who is charged with being in Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's shadow, his hip pocket the whole game. Is that Tyreek Stevenson? Is that Tay Crowder? I need to know who that is, and I need to see how effective Georgia can be. Because those, to me right there, that's plan A and plan B of holding back LSU.
So the word of the day may be yak, yards after catch. Of course, if Georgia wins, there could be a very different kind of yak involved with the celebration, the partying that goes on. You may have UGA fans yakking all over the street before it's all said and done. Very different kind of yak.
I mean, so everybody, let me just flip something around a little bit.
Part of this.
Everybody wonders, can Georgia hold LSU to 24-27? It's a building block, fundamental way to look at that game. Flip it around, though. Is this LSU defense good enough to hold this Georgia chop ground game to 14-21 points? I don't think a lot of people are talking about, can LSU's defense hold Georgia? A lot of people wonder, can Georgia get to 21? Can Georgia get to 24? I'm going to tell you, LSU's 2 cornerbacks, they're 5 stars. LSU's freshman cornerback on the other side is as talented as any freshman Georgia has on its roster. The big thing, though, where are the holes that you can exploit? I don't think LSU is a very good tackling team up the middle. I don't think their middle linebackers do a good job of getting off blocks. I don't think their defensive line does a good job of getting off blocks. And right there is how Georgia can move the ball against LSU.
Yeah, I cited a number on Dog Nation Daily today, and I have no idea if this is true because I heard it. I didn't see it, didn't read it. But there's a guy named Payne Insider on a podcast this week who said in the absence of Devin White, first 9-10 games of the regular season, LSU was allowing 70% of its passes to be completed over the middle, which maybe brings in an Eli Wolf, brings in a Charlie Warner in a game like this, especially no George Pickens for the first half, a group of receivers that Fromm's not sure how much he trusts, 2 tight end sets, throwing the ball, obviously gives you an opportunity to maybe run the football a little bit more too, and more time for a guy like Tyler Simmons to potentially get open. Maybe this is a game where tight ends get involved.
Can we flip it around a little bit?
Flip it.
Now, if you're LSU and you're playing Georgia's offense right now, you don't have Cager, you don't have Pickens for the first half, you have a limited DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
That is a big chunk of that offense.
That's a good point.
Definitely. My threat would be, I'm gonna attack your box as much as possible.
Yeah.
I'm gonna overload it. I'm going to force you to do something other than lean on your big nasties between the tackles and see what else you got. Can you score? Can you threaten us in any other way than what we think Georgia should do, right?
Yeah.
We just all set up here. We should lean on them. We should bring Brian Harrion in and rely on our offensive line. LSU knows that. They know what we have as options. That's what, I mean, as a defensive coordinator, that's the number one thing I would try to eliminate.
So my question then becomes, okay, go back to the Notre Dame game for a moment, where most Georgia fans were pretty unhappy with the first half game plan there. Too many horizontal throws, not enough vertical attack. But if you've got a box that's stacked, and you've got the potential to throw to a playmaker who could make one man miss, does a revisiting of the first half game plan for Notre Dame, even though statistically it was not effective at all, does that game plan become more of a neutralization for a defense that's crowding the middle so much?
Can I jump in, Jeff? Do you mind?
Sure.
So I really looked at that game in depth, spent way too much time on it. That was a lack of execution. When we moved the ball consistently that first half, it was effective down the field against Notre Dame. We missed a pass to Eli Wolf, who's a guy who's made big catches, and then he's had some drops that were costly. That Notre Dame game in the first half, that's one of them. So, yes, I think he's a factor. I think if you can get Charlie Warner or Eli Wolf, either one involved, and when you give them that opportunity, if they can execute on that, that's a different offense for us. But that game plan against Notre Dame of we're going to try to open it up a little bit, it was effective. It was the players not executing is when we stalled.
You want to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, so like folks can order up anything they want off the Marlow's menu. Here's what I'd like to order up. I'd like to order up a lot of the inside zone from the Georgia run game. I would like to see Fromm go under center some more, hit that play action a little bit, because everybody knows that's what they're going to do. And I think that's one of Jake Fromm's true strengths is the play action game and knowing where to go with the football. And, man, you got a lot of things to look at. And the other thing this is what I feel when I look at this game. George Pickens, obviously he's a factor. He's Georgia's leading receiver in catches, yards, and touchdowns. Well, he's only going to play 2 quarters. But to me, he is such a highly emotional young man. It's part of the stuff that makes him great. It's part of the stuff that gets him suspended for 2 quarters. I think this young man wears his heart on his sleeve so much. Maybe he will try to do so much for this game. But I think the way and the situations that he has affected this game, in my mind, it almost guarantees he's going to have a big game in that second half.
Yeah, I love the idea of Pickens coming into the game, scoring a touchdown, and obviously that would be a very, very exciting moment. It's our Marlow's matchup. Kroger, I should say our, Road to Atlanta.
Road to Atlanta.
Yeah. Boy, a lot of shows, a lot of names. Sometimes it's hard for me to keep them all straight. But it's Marlow's matchup. It's Road to Atlanta. It's presented by Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. And by the way, speaking of Marlow's Tavern, if you're just tuning in, this is the Michelle Brute Sparkling Wine. It's a great holiday offer. Marlow's has done this now for a long time. It's a great way to get acquainted with the tavern right there in your neighborhood. Stop on by, get a $50 gift card. It makes a great gift. You know it's going to fit the person you buy it for. And a lot of folks have hard shopping list. Hard people to buy for. You never know what they want. I can promise you they want chef-inspired food. I can promise you they want craft cocktails as well. And when you get the $50 gift card, you get the Michelle Brute Sparkling Wine as a complimentary gift for you. And even better, when you do the $100 gift card, in addition to the Michelle Brute Sparkling Wine, you also get a complimentary $20 gift card as well. Now, far be it from me to tell you what to do with your life. My guess is you should keep the 20 for yourself, give the 100 to somebody else. That'll make for a good holiday season for you and the person that you are giving a gift to. All right, Jeff, we'll do more on the SEC Championship in a moment. While we got you here, and I know for a lot of our audience who's gathered in, one of the things they want to talk a lot about is recruiting. So a lot of coaches on the road right now. Georgia has done some of this, but the SEC Championship takes center stage. Just give me a little bit of a snapshot recruiting timeline, next couple of dominoes that could fall. Not necessarily obvious UGA commits, but decisions that'll be made, really those 2 or 3 names and storylines at the forefront in your mind right now as we head towards the start of the early signing period, a little bit less than 2 weeks from right now.
So I think the first thing you got to start with is 15. That's how many public commitments Georgia has right now. And because they use scholarships this year on graduate transfer Cager, graduate transfer Wolf, the number most in the industry are approximating is 23 or 24. That's how many guys Georgia can sign this year. Won't be a full class. So let's do our quick math. Who are the next 9 names? Well, you saw Georgia lose Corey Wren out of that class, and I don't think that was a shocker. I think that was a situation where Corey Wren, who was a longtime commitment, decides that he needs to do the best thing for him, and that's no longer the University of Georgia. I think Georgia's going to get really radical and extreme with the wide receiver recruiting the rest of this way. That means bringing in proven prospects, guys with speed that can put their foot in the ground and go. We're talking about top 100 receivers. We're talking about guys that are true 4.4s on the laser and guys that are rated highly as receivers. Wren was more of a project like Miko Hardman. Sure, he was a 4.3 guy. Sure, he ran a 10.45 in the 100. but he was playing out of a veer offense in high school and is primarily a running back kick returner. Georgia wants to win now. They want to bring proven products in now. That's why this week in our coverage, you've seen the name Jermaine Burton. You've seen the name Arias Smith out of Florida. That's a guy that can run in the Pan American games. True 10 3-speed, true 4 3-speed, the number 75 overall player. Those are the receivers that's going to make that wide receiver room for Georgia more dangerous next year. It's a direct consequence of what Will Muschamp did and everybody in the SEC saying, we're going to man you up, we're going to dare you to beat you downfield, we're going to see if you can scare us because you don't have anybody that can stretch the field deep. 3 names everybody wants to know about: Keely Ringo, Darnell Washington, Jordan Birch. Those are the 3 big 5 stars that Georgia has left on the table. Ringo's going to make his decision at the All-American Bowl. That's January the 4th. Look for him to make a vital official visit the rest of this month. The other name to think about there is Darnell Washington, visiting Miami this weekend, visiting Tennessee the next weekend. He wants to make his decision no later than January the 2nd. Folks, that's a 6'7.5", 265-pound tight end. I don't care who's covering him. He will be an immediate matchup problem in the SEC. Georgia can bring those burners in at wide receiver. Then they can add a Darnell Washington at wide receiver. All of a sudden, what's the catchphrase for James Coley, who I think is going to have a good game on Saturday calling the plays? His catchphrase has always been, change the game. What Georgia's trying to do with the wide receiver position and the tight end position is change the room. Flip the room like they've done with the offensive line, like they've done with inside linebacker and outside linebacker in the last 2 recruiting cycles.
I mean, Jeff, I'll tell you this, that it's obviously been kind of a long wait for Georgia fans about any kind of recruiting news, and some of the flurries we've gotten recently have, frankly, not been great news. But you want to get my attention? Start talking about getting involved with Jermaine Burton again, a guy that has shown great athleticism, very close with the guy that we're friends with in Terrence Edwards, former UGA wide receiver. Getting back involved in Jermaine Burton will get you excited when it comes to the 2020 receivers. A guy like Arian Smith, because of the speed, because of his overall rating, this late in the process, Georgia, who needs receivers, could be in the mix for a top 100 player like that. Those are headline names for me, Jeff. And, there's already a lot of hay in the barn for the 2020 class, but in terms of what still could be done, even if some of these other guys out there Georgia ends up missing on, bringing a guy like Burton, bringing a guy like Smith would be quite a flurry at a position where Georgia really needs some help.
Yeah, so here's a quick snapshot on Jermaine Burton. He bounced around a lot. He was at Hapeville Charter in Atlanta, then he went to IMG. Folks, he was a sophomore at IMG Academy where they get all the best prospects in the nation. He parachutes in and immediately becomes a starter his sophomore year at IMG. Then he goes to California. The 3 huge things to think about with Jermaine Burton. He runs a 4.4, and he jumps over swimming pools.
Y'all seen that video, right, where he just completely leaps past the swimming pool?
He jumps over.
Reminds me of myself at a younger age.
He jumps over, I guess, the 50-yard line of the swimming pool going horizontal. He also runs a 4.4, and Terrence Edwards, who we're going to call the Mr. Miyagi of wide receiver trainers in the state of Georgia, he has said that Jermaine Burton has some of the most innate natural ball skills he's ever seen. And now he took a visit, one of those LSU commitment, by the way, took a visit last week to Athens during the Georgia Tech week, during those preparations. You tell me Georgia can get a guy like him who will bring Dominic Blaylock stuff to the equation at wide receiver for Georgia should he sign with the Bulldogs. And then you can get Arian Smith, a guy that is faster than Mecole Hardman was in high school, but also is 6'1", about 195 pounds. And to me, I don't know how everybody else feels, that sounds a little bit better than a 5'9", 170-pound receiver that runs the veer. Make no mistake, I think Corey Wren will be a deadly player in college football. But for Georgia, that's not what they need right now to strike while this team and this defense is hot in 2020.
Yeah, I think that Smith is just a more refined, polished player. That's why it's a more attractive fit, I think, for Georgia. It's obviously a competitive recruitment down to the wire, but it's a more attractive player all the way around. John, there's a comment in the YouTube section I want to get your thoughts on here in a moment, and Jeff, we'll let you weigh in on there as well. It is our Marlow's Matchup Road to Atlanta presented by our friends here at Marlow's Tavern tonight, and of course Kroger and Georgia United Credit Union. And you're getting ready for holidays with Kroger. They got these really cool party platters you ought to know about. Meat and cheese trays, shrimp platters, veggie trays. You get together with people at the office, whatever else. They started just $19.99. You can check those out at a Kroger very close to you. So, John, in our YouTube comment section, there's a lot of talk about Grant Delpit, the LSU safety. Now, Delpit's probably going to be a top 5 pick, or at least a top 10 pick. Very good chance of being a first-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. A little bit like Christian Fulton as well, who's a good defensive back. Derek Stingley, one of the best freshmen in the entire country. It's kind of weird, and maybe this is an opportunity for Georgia to exploit. A lot of these individual names for LSU are all pristine prospects and very good players. But at times this year, this LSU secondary hasn't added up to what the sum of the parts would make you think they're supposed to be. The individual parts make you think they're supposed to be. I'm not going to change my tune on this that Georgia wins the game by, as Kirby likes to say, chopping the wood. But exploiting a secondary that hasn't always played great, maybe if it's in the second half even when Pickens is back in there, even with all the big bold print names, this is an LSU secondary that can be had.
Yeah, I think they've underperformed, especially if you look at the amount of talent they have in that secondary. They have given up some big plays and some consistent drives. I think that's surprising to anybody who's watched LSU play, looking at the amount of talent they have in that secondary. You think, man, they've got great corners, they've got a truly special safety, but yet you watch them play and there's plays to be made. And I think Georgia can find those holes, but it's going to be against top-level competition because there's a reason why he's going to be a first-round pick come April.
So I probably been watching LSU, especially the last 3 or 4 weeks when it became a conclusion to me that was going to be a team to look for. I'm going to tell you, Grant Delpit, a little bit of the bloom is off the rose a little bit right now. You see Delpit in space, you see him trying to zero in on guys, and he's no longer that sure tackler coming down in, flying downhill that you most thought he would be, because he was arguably the top safety in the country coming in. He was a guy that still you hear his name as a top 10, top 15 type draft pick. But if you look on that film, and that never lies, I mean, the guy might have all the size and speed in the world, but he's not making those plays in space.
He hasn't had the season I thought he'd have.
I mean, really, the Jeffrey Okudah out of Ohio State's a guy that I think has leapfrogged him into the alpha safety in the class, at least in this potential draft class in 2020 for the NFL. And you start looking around there, LSU's defense, this is what Stitch was saying a minute ago. They've got a lot of great players, like that all-star team he talked about back between the hedges. They're just not playing great together. You look at Stingley. Stingley, number one corner in the country last year. Jacoby Stevens, number one safety in the country a couple years ago. That's the class that Fromm and Thomas and LeCout came out. But that one guy that's really interesting to me is their inside linebacker, a guy by the name of Jacob Phillips, number one inside linebacker in that 2017 class. And you watch him on a lot of plays, his eye discipline is not where it needs to be, and he's running himself away from the ball on a lot of plays.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think, forgive me, but a lot of the five-star recruits, they get 5 stars because they look pretty. They're big, they're physical, they have the athletic attributes to be everything that you'd want them to be as a player. That doesn't always make you a great football player.
Not always, for sure.
And I think Delpit's one of those guys where he looks good on the hoof. He can run, he's big, he has those physical plays where you like the way he plays, but it's the consistency. Give me an Edwards-Helaire, may not be the big pretty. He's not the all-bus team coming off from Oakland Raiders, who at every position they're huge and monstrous, but the guy can play. I think that's the difference between what makes great teams and not just having great players.
Well, John, along those lines, Cameron Merrill in our YouTube comment section says he'll take J.R. Reed over Grant Delpit. Yeah. I don't know how the NFL is going to view that, but I will say this. J.R. Reed's a better player in Georgia's system, I believe, than Grant Delpit would be.
He's hands down more consistent, and that if you're trying to build a team for now, we're not talking about the NFL. Delpit probably translates better to the NFL game than J.R. Reed does. But we're talking about college football. J.R. Reed is elite in his ability to perform at this level, which as a Dog fan, that's what matters most right now.
All right, we're going to get ready to wrap up. Jeff, how about a final thought from you on kind of how you see Saturday unfolding and just kind of what you'd have Georgia fans look for as we head towards Saturday afternoon?
So remember last year with Tua and that big-time Alabama offense, remember what happened? A LeCount interception, a J.R. Reed interception early. That's what's going to happen with Georgia. LSU's going to march down the field, but I think Georgia's got to bow their necks up a lot. One other name that I think has to have a monster legacy-defining game for Georgia, and it's probably the name on this team the best player on the Georgia team that you have mentioned the least on all your programming, and that is a young man by the name of Syke. That is Tyler Clark, number 52. He needs to have a monster game for Georgia.
A lot of applause for Tyler in here. Great season thus far.
And here's the reason why. Everybody, it's part of our media world. Everybody wants to go out and talk to the press and talk about how well they play. That's not Tyler Clark's game whatsoever. He's told the coaches, he's like, no, not my thing. I don't want to go out. I don't want to be a cover boy. But, man, he is hard to block. And I think back to how well he was playing in that Rose Bowl run in 2017 when everybody thought he might be 3 and done. And you think about J.R. Reed, a guy, let's face it, I think J.R. Reed has been one of the top 2 players or 3 players on Georgia's defense for 3 straight seasons in a row. He's up for all those big boy awards. Those are 2 guys that have to have DGD MVP type games on Saturday.
John, how about a final thought from you?
I love it. I love that you start with Tyler Clark because I think this defensive line has to control the game. I think you can't let LSU be two-dimensional. They can't have a good run attack, which should open up for their playmakers. They've got some dynamic playmakers. So if Georgia can lean in on that front 4 and affect their run game, make LSU one-dimensional, I think that helps out our offense and leads to a game where Georgia fans can be cheering at the end of it.
I just want to say one thing.
By all means.
You're really good at all these Reed stuff. You went through Kroger party platters. You went through sparkling wine, champagne. I don't know if Burrow or Fromm are going to look off and make their reads as quickly as you do. So just one thing I wanted to say. Appreciate B.A. moment right here. He's just like, and then he jumps in with a little Facebook comment here or there, some YouTube, and then he's bouncing back and forth between me and Stitch.
I'm a point guard. I'm a distributor. I'm a game manager. I'm more of a show manager. Not spectacular, just trying to distribute the football where to go. It's funny you should bring that up because you may notice in the desk right here, our friends from Hover Helmet spins floating in midair.
Another plug.
Seamless.
Another plug.
If you go to hoverhelmets.com, use the promo code DogNation. Hoverhelmets.com/DogNation. Use the promo code DogNation. You can get 20% off this right here. Hover Helmet's been with us for all of our Marlow's matchup events. People always love it when we bring one out to the various Marlow's taverns around the Atlanta area. Check them out, hoverhelmets.com/DogNation. Use the promo code DogNation. You can save 20%. Final thought for me is this. You know, when we do the show like this, I got the lights in front of me. I can't see what's on the other side of the lights, but I do always love to hear the glasses clinking, the forks hitting the plates, the laughter coming out. It's really the thing that Marlow's Tavern is famous for. They are always so hospitable to us every time we come out. It's great to hear people having a great time. I can't wait now to get off the air, get in the mix with them here, enjoy some of this food and beverage myself, and we'll talk some more Georgia football. If you have never been at one of these events, when the show goes off the air, the fun continues. We've got a really good Q&A coming up, so Jeff's going to reveal all the secrets of UGA recruiting, what really happened with, you can fill in the blank with whatever. John's got great insight on how the dogs hopefully get it done on Saturday. Our buddy Connor Raleigh here there as well. So we're going to have a great time here at the Marlows and Peachtree Corner. So if you couldn't be with us tonight, make sure at Marlow's Tavern again very soon. Thanks for being with us on video. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time for Road to Atlanta again. Tonight here at the Marlow's matchup. Have a great night, everybody.